Hello peoples off the tube. It's the first video of a new year. It's just the same me. But it's a different year. So yeah, the last video I did was my end of year roundup video, and the only real piece of feedback I got about that was from my old friend the gnome, and he was a little bit disappointed that I didn't talk more about the hike that I was on in the summer, McClellan's stag hike, which for some reason I was invited to. One could debate my eligibility for attending such an event, but let's not worry about that. So that's basically what this video is. I'm going to tell you the story in as concise and abridged a way as possible, because I can see me just talking for an hour. It's currently 10:30, so I've got 2 hours until lunch. I could just talk that whole time. Hopefully not. Yeah, I'm just going to tell you the tale, some of the tale, edited for decency, because people were up to shenanigans. I wasn't, obviously. I'm not a shenaniganizer, but here, yeah. So this is, well, welcome to this. If that sounds really boring, fair enough. You can go. You don't have to watch me talking for however long. It'll say down there how long I'm going to talk for. But otherwise, yeah. Here is the tale of the hike the tie was on.
The tale of the hike that I was on.
So first of all, a little prelude to this. The hike itself was a week. There's a whole week of, well, it wasn't entirely hiking, but they were out in the wild for a week, and I was invited to all of this. But the problem, I'm not an outside person. That's why I'm almost always inside in my videos. I live inside. So I wanted to go because it was sort of for McClellan's wedding, and although it was Gnome that invited me, both of those were people that I was quite keen to see. I hadn't seen either of them in a while, and a variety of my other friends from school. For a bit, some of them were gathered in Aberdeen when I was in Aberdeen, and like 5 years ago. But apart from that, I hadn't seen any of them for a while, so I thought it'd be nice to everyone to see how they're getting on. But yeah, I was invited to the whole thing, and I had concerns. Specifically, I, bathrooms wise, there are none out and about out in the wilderness. There are no bathrooms. You can't just go to the toilet. And I mean, I'm not a big fan of like public bathrooms in general, but at least they are a place where you can go into a secluded space where there are not it's not outside. So that was my principal concern. I was like, you know what? Will there actually be any actual bathrooms? Um, and I was reassured that in fact on 3 of the nights worth of the trip there would be. And so I was like, well, okay, I will go for that bit of the trip. Turned out that was a lie. There were no bathrooms. Well, pretty much there were no bathrooms. Like the place where we set up camp the first night, there were none. There was one somewhere in the village that was not within walking distance. We were able to go like the next day, and then nothing between that and way into the following day. So fortunately, I'm very good at holding it in. But like, that's like 3 times I went to the toilet in the course of like 4 days. That's probably not good for me. Anyway, that toilet details. You don't want to know about that. That's not a story that you need. So I'll try and keep it to fairly concise and interesting bits of the story. I got picked up by Neil, who was also joining the trip on the. I joined on the Friday. I think they started on the Wednesday. And I joined them on the Friday. Neil was also joining on the Friday and leaving on the Saturday night, so he was just there for one night. And so I got a lift to a place called Kinloch U, which is in the middle of nowhere. A recurring theme you'll find for the entirety of this trip. This teeny little place called Kinloch U, and we got there about 5 minutes earlier than we were meant to. We're 5 10 minutes. The rest of the group were hiking over a big mountain from somewhere. I wouldn't want to guess exactly where they'd been. But it turned out that their hike took them much longer than they were expecting. So me and Neil were just sort of mooching around Kinloch U for about 2 hours while we wait for everyone to turn up, which is fine. We just waited around. Everyone turned up. We had to, because the only person that had a car with them was Neil, and it's like a little tiny Vauxhall Corsa. So there's with loads of equipment that because Gnome and McClellan and the Ape and Sandy. I don't. I feel like I need to put a surname on him because I don't really know him that well, but I don't know what his surname is, so that's fine. All these people, they came over the hill. Eventually, we saw them from quite a distance away. But that meant there was six of us, and the car didn't hold six. And also, there's loads of stuff that they've been hauling, all the equipment and those giant bags and things. So we had to sort of do two trips to the place where we were planning on camping, which is down on the other end of Kinloch. We sort of drove up to meet them because they're taking forever. Anyway, so that was fun. Me and Noam waited behind while everyone else was getting shipped off by Neil to the place where they're planning on setting up camp, and then we got hauled over. We got there, and it was full of midges. Um, this is a thing peculiar to Scotland, I think. Certainly this end of the world. Just in the summertime, in the countryside, just these teeny tiny, and they bite you, and they're small and they're annoying and they swarm around you. They don't really bite me. I don't really have any issue with getting bitten by them, but they're still annoying when they're going and bumping into your face. I'm not a big fan. So that was an annoyance. Everyone had these nets that they put on their heads, except me because I didn't have one. I wasn't into going outside enough to warrant the cost of buying one. I did bring some midget repellent, which was on the floor actually behind me. I had a bottle of this stuff that I got in Menorca because there was kind of bitey insects there, and I actually did get bitten a few times. And we got this, and I think it's just like citronella. That did nothing. That did absolutely nothing. They also had a bottle of like really strong chemical insect repellent because even with their net hats on, everyone was getting really annoyed with the midges. The extreme chemical insect repellent also did nothing. The midges just they didn't care. Eventually, we set up a fire. Like this is out on like a pebble beach next to a big loch, and they built up a giant fire for cooking our dinner, and the smoke drove the midges away. I didn't particularly enjoy sitting in the fire smoke, but also I did because there was no midges there. So that was nice. About half of the group decided they were going to go swimming, which was unpleasant because they did so with no clothes on, and I was not all about that at all. So while Ape and McClellan and Sandy were off being naked, me and Noam and Neil went off to I think that was when we were getting the firewood for the fire. So that was unpleasant. That seemed to be a recurring theme because the Ape seemed to enjoy becoming naked at frequent intervals. He is not a person with great modesty. So that was an unpleasant aspect of that trip. But never mind. Let's not dwell on that. Let's just erase that image from our memories. So yeah, so that was the first night. Um, and we set up the tents at something like 2 in the morning, and I'd had my sleepers at whatever 11 o'clock, and so I was pretty out of it by this point. I wasn't that sure what was going on, but we all went to bed. And me and Neil were in the little teeny tent, and the other four were in the slightly bigger tent. I couldn't sleep very well. We were sort of on a pebbly slope, and it went like along like that and then down. So I was like on a corner, and it was really uncomfortable. It was just a stony corner. I think I got about 3 hours sleep. I woke up about 5, and then I sort of waited around until 7 when it was a bit lighter, and then I just got out and waited around next to where the fire had been because we put the fire out by then. And everyone else apparently was very comfortable because I suppose they're all used to sleeping outside, and so they didn't get up until 10. So I was about 5 hours of just me. That's fine. I mean that's normal for me. It's not normal for me to be up that early, but I spend a lot of time by myself, so I wasn't put out by that. Uh, but yeah, by the time everyone had gotten up and had breakfast, it was like the middle of the day. It was about 12 o'clock. Spam joined us then because he'd not been on the trip yet. Um, and this was now Saturday morning, and we made a second campfire and had a giant cooked breakfast. The food, by the way, every meal was amazing. We had the Ape had provided all this stuff like meats that he'd like put into marinades in like bags overnight, and the food was so good. Like really really nice food. And I'd never tried halloumi cheese before. That's really nice. It's really weird. It doesn't go gooey when it's hot, which still bamboozles me. But yeah, so that was all really nice. But yeah, by the time we'd had our breakfast and Spam had joined us, we'd used up like most of the day. The plan was to hike from Kinloch to um, Torridon, somewhere near. We're going to find somewhere near Torridon, which is another place in the middle of nowhere. We're going to hike there and set up camp. But we'd used up the whole day. There wasn't time to hike to Torridon. Fortunately, Neil was still there with his car, so he drove us in installments. We stopped off at a service station and got some drinks. Because here's another issue we had. I don't drink alcohol at all, and there was very little non-alcoholic drinks provided. I don't think they quite thought about that. And I told Spam to bring some lemonade or something, so I had something to drink. And he very begrudgingly brought like a tiny little bottle of Sprite, and that was it. I was like, yeah, great, that's going to do me for the next 2 nights, isn't it? Thanks. Considering that everyone's expenses were being added up, you know, and I mean, I have since repaid my debts to the group at large. It seems a bit stingy for. I had this issue before, and I brought this up many times on the hike. Back when Spam and Gnome lived in Aberdeen, um, I went to their flat warming party, and I ate half a box of Tesco Value Jaffa cakes that turned out to belong to Spam. And he went on and on about this until like I left Aberdeen for a while because I went away. Anyone that watches my videos regularly might have spotted this interval when I was back in Inverness for about 6 months in early 2014. So pretty much the entire time up until not long before I left, he was going on about these Jaffa cakes that I'd eaten, and in the end, I find out how much they cost, which is like almost nothing, and give him the cost of half a box of Jaffa cakes. He says he doesn't remember this, but I do remember this. I'm sure he does. I mean, at least in mindset, if nothing else. So yeah, he begrudged also the lemonade. So I went and bought like my own bottle, like a big 2 litre bottle at the convenience store. And then anyway, so Neil drove us all up to Torridon again in 2 installments because there were um, by this point 7 of us, and the car really only had room for 4 plus um, you know, bags and equipment, so loads of stuff and food. So he drove me and Gnome and Ape up to the place. We drove around a bit and looked for somewhere nice to that was not near any, well, I say not near any houses. There was actually a little house on its own, but didn't seem to be anyone staying there. So we were kind of just out with the grounds near the place, but kind of not. And then Neil went back to get Sandy and Spam and McClellan, and they came back, and they just sat in the car. By this point, we'd sort of found a good spot to set up the tents. I think maybe we had set up the tents. So there was a little bit on the river, this little stream where we set up. We're going to have our fire on this, like, another little pebbly beach, a smaller one. It was down the hill, so there wasn't any like plants. So it was nice and safe for our fire making. But yeah, the other 3 decided that they didn't want to spend the afternoon setting up camp. They wanted to go to the Torridon pub and watch the football. And Ape got very annoyed about this, and he said that they were being wide many times. This is a phrase that I'd never heard before. Apparently, I missed this bit of sort of local slang. If you're being wide, then you're being discourteous or rude, or just generally not very cool, I guess. So that was fun. He said that they were wide many times. They came back eventually, and they brought a load of wood with them, and they said, "Oh yeah, we were actually out getting firewood," but actually no, they weren't. They were watching the football, and they just said that so that Ape wouldn't be grumpy with them for the rest of the trip. So that was kind of annoying, but I didn't particularly mind. I'm kind of glad that I wasn't in the football group because I wouldn't have, I didn't want to watch football. This is during the World Cup, so I think that was the night that England, they were already like kind of out of it, but then I think that was them very out of it. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to definitively say that because I have no idea. I don't know or care. So yeah, so that was nice. We set up camp there. We had another really nice dinner. Neil left with his car because he was going back home on, like I said, on Saturday night. And then it started to rain, so everyone got off to bed fairly early. Sort of like 10, I say fairly, like 10 o'clock. It was still light, I think. And no one had said to me, set my alarm for, I don't remember what time it was, early-ish in the morning. I was to wake up, set myself an alarm, wake up, and then wake everyone else up. And I was like, I can do that. I will probably not sleep very well tonight either. And I mean, I slept better the night before, but I didn't sleep very well. And I woke up, and there were midges everywhere. It was raining a little bit still. And I told everyone to get up, and they did not get up. I spent like 2 hours saying, hey, you told me to tell you to get up. And everyone got really grumpy at me, and I thought I'll unpeg their tent so it falls down, but I didn't know how to make it fall down. I unpegged the tent and it just like let water in. And they were really grumpy. And I was like, well, like, you told me to wake you up. Why not just not tell me to do that? But that day we did have a hike, and it was intense. So once everyone finally got up, we had some breakfast, and we packed up the stuff we were taking with us, and uh, burned anything we weren't. We were all set to go, and this hike took us up this very steep, mountainy, hilly thing. And I've never been, well, I've been up one, I don't know if it is a mountain or if it's just a big hill, on the first year field trip at Milburn. So this would be when I was 12, going on 13. They take you on a trip into Bad Gush, which is near here-ish, and you go up a mountain called Mila Buchel. And it's not very big, I don't think. And that's the only time I've ever been up anything resembling mountain climbing. And back then I was 13, 12, 13, and I'm 26 now. So I'm twice as old and 3 times as fat, and I haven't exercised for half my life. So that was hard. We had to go right up this hill, and it was like there's a stream, but it wasn't a stream because it was a hill, so it was like a waterfall ravine splashing down. We had to jump up stone to stone to stone, and we had about an hour of this, just going up this really steep hill, and the rain was kind of mist spattering down, and I had on my kind of cheap, very old cagoule and that hideous quilted jumper that is not quite in frame. It's on the chair over there, actually. That's also old, and everyone else was slightly better dressed for the weather because they're used to being outside. They have outsidey clothes. I'd sort of made do, and I had my sleeping bag was strapped onto my rucksack. My rucksack fell to bits because the zip burst because it was overfilled, and it's a very old rucksack. And it's about half the size of everyone else's ridiculous rucksacks. It's like the size of a normal sized person. This was grim. This was a grim hour. By the time we got an hour up the hill and we kind of leveled off a bit, I was like, I can't. If it's going to be this for like the hours on end, I can't manage this. This is unbearable. Fortunately, at that point we came to a path, like an actual path that sort of, was more or less flat. It wasn't that. It was sort of that at least, and that was manageable. And over the next hour, I sort of recovered from that ordeal. I drank most of my water because I took a bottle of Inverness tap water. I wasn't that keen on drinking water out of streams or ponds or things like that because you don't know where it's been. It's outside. I don't know what's outside. I don't know these things. So I did have to refill it at a stream. I managed to get one that was fairly clean, a little bit gritty. But yeah, after an hour, I was feeling fine again. But my sleeping bag was like soaking wet from like swinging around on the end of my bag in the rain. Um, and people were wondering if maybe they should just send me home that night if I didn't have a dry sleeping bag to sleep in. And I was like, well, I mean, I've gone through all this ordeal. I kind of feel like I should stay for the rest of the bit of the trip because I was planning. By this point, this was Sunday, and I was going home on Monday. I had a bus booked for Monday afternoon, and I mean, I wasn't going to lose anything if I went home early because the bus didn't cost me anything. But at the same time, I stuck it out that far. I wanted to kind of keep going. But anyway, regardless of that, we still had that day's hike to do, and it was on off kind of grim because we got to the top of this bit, we went down, and because it was raining so heavily, the path had turned into a stream, so we were wading through the stream. I had on the predecessor to these boots, which had kind of worn through at the bottom, and They were completely saturated, as was everything I was wearing. I was completely soaking wet, and it wasn't really. It was all very heavy, and clingy, and unpleasant. Got to a bothy for lunch, and we had some lunch there, and we hiked a bit further. I don't remember how far. Like I looked it up on a map, and we went something like 22 kilometers. But like that can't possibly be right. It must be less than that. Maybe that was included because after that we hitchhiked, and um, I should say that this is not an activity I particularly ever envisioned myself doing. It's not one that I would do unless I was with a group of people that knew what they were doing, because that seems like the most dangerous thing. In my head, hitchhiking is just like, hey, can you give me a ride? I can kill you. Well, that's close enough. Or, hey, can you give me a ride? Yes, I can. Great, I will kill you on the way. Uh, so no one killed anyone, which was quite nice. We had a lot of fun. McClellan and Ape decided they would go off as a two to, because it's easier to get a lift for two people than it is to get a lift for six or four. So we were split into pairs, and Ape and McClellan went off. And before me and Gnome could separate from Sandy and Spam, a car came along that was a guy that knew Gnome, actually, bizarrely. What a small world. And he gave all four of us a lift in his car. We were kind of concerned for Ape and McClellan because they both kind of looked less They were very beardy. Ape in particular looks like he's just crawled out of the woods. A very raggedy, scraggly, long, thick brown beard, and McClellan at least looks fairly reputable. But the combination of beards, all the beards was in one group. So yeah, we mocked and jeered at them as we went past. But the joke was on us in there because we got as far as the road going down to Plockton, which is where we were going that night. We had a dinner booked at the Plockton Arms Inn. There's a little pub in Plockton. It's where you can have a dinner. Um, so we got to the sort of junction where the road goes. You can go that way to Kyle of Lochalsh and eventually Skye, or you can go that way to Plockton. You can get to Kyle of Lochalsh and Skye via that way, but it's slightly further. And then eventually we walked down the road a bit, but it was kind of way longer than we were expecting because it's 7 miles, which doesn't sound very far until you try to walk it, and then it's like, this is really boring. So we got a lift. Me and Gnome were the last ones to get there eventually, and ironically, um, McClellan and Ape got the whole way there in one journey and got there before everyone else. So I suppose it serves us right for taking the Mickey out of them. But anyway, we all got there, and everyone was in time to watch the World Cup final, which was so boring. I talked about this in my New Year's video. It's only the second game of football I've ever watched, and hopefully it will be the last because it was just so boring. Like, even if you're interested in football as a sport, I can't see what you can get out of it because they hardly played any football. Half the time it was the player would run up, then just like go woo and fall over and pretend that they got injured colliding with another player, and they didn't. And that was the whole game. And Spam was like, "Oh yes, I'm not huge into football, but this is football at its finest." Is it? Is it really? I'd hate to see football at its worst in that case, because that was awful. I had a very bad view of it as well, because obviously, the pub was full of people there to watch the World Cup. It was projecting on a big projector screen, and since I wasn't that interested in it, I wasn't going to sit in one of the prime seats because that's kind of selfish. So the wall where the projector screen was, there's a little door like here. Imagine the door's there, and I'm sat here, and then the projector screen's just there. And so I'm looking at it very side on, so everything's sort of stretched up the way and squashed in the way. And everyone is just all these spaghetti people spaghettiing around. So that was the only entertaining thing. We also got a trailer for Doctor Who at the half time, but it was kind of underwhelming, and especially since I waited. I don't know how long it was, the football game. I feel like it might just have been 2 hours, but it felt like 5. Anyway, we stayed there for like a long time because it was horrible and wet still outside, and we had our dinner. I changed into some dry clothes. Fortunately, my rucksack, clothes in my rucksack weren't wet, or they were, I mean, a little bit damp, but they weren't soaking wet. So I was able to get changed. My boots were still soaking wet, so I was just going about the pub in my socks. Um, and we had our dinner. That was lovely. McClellan's dad and his brother came to join us for dinner, and yeah, we had a really nice time. But then the problem was we'd been in this pub all night. It was warm. It was dry. Outside, it was cold and wet. No one wanted to go camping again. Uh, I didn't particularly. Gnome did. Gnome was very committed to the camping, and he had me go scouting for possible sites with him. And we saw one place that might be okay, but there was a cow there, so I don't know if the cow would have wanted us sharing its field. But in the end, Spam looked up on the internet, and there was a bunkhouse, which is kind of like a youth hostel, but not really. I don't really know exactly how to describe it. You can get a room with a load of bunk beds in it, and they have a kitchen you can use if you want, and they've got bathrooms, which I was all for, and showers, which I was all for, and it was inside and warm, which I was all for because bear in mind my sleeping bag was soaking wet. Uh, so yeah, Spam tried to get in touch to ask could we get a discount since there's seven of us because McClellan's dad went home after the dinner, but his brother stayed for the night. And we didn't really. That's another thing. There were seven of us again. This was the first time at night that there'd been seven because Neil was there the first night, and then he was gone the second night, and Spam was there instead. So it was always six of us, and there's only six tent positions. There was a two-person tent and a four-person tent. So it would have been a bit of a squeeze But anyway, he asked could they get a discount, and they told him no. And then Ape went and phoned and turned on his bizarre apely charm and got it so that we could have a room with six beds in it for the cost of six people staying, but we could have a seventh person stay and they could sleep on the floor. And the person that got it ended up being Gnome. We had a bidding auction amongst themselves because I was like, okay, I don't care if I'm paying more. I'm sleeping in a bed because I hadn't gotten any good sleep the last 2 nights. And who would take the least price cut? Like when, for example, instead of everyone paying a seventh, like if everyone paid a sixth and that person that was on the floor paid nothing, right? That would be the worst bid. But then if everyone paid exactly 1/7, then that would be the best bid. If you paid the full price, but then that's not going to be worth it because then you're sleeping on the floor and you're not saving any money. So it's who would pay the most but still get a reduction would sleep on the floor. It was Gnome anyway. No wanted to sleep on the floor. I think he was a bit put out about the fact we weren't camping. But that was a pleasant night. We went off gallivanting. Ape had brought I don't remember which element it was. There's one of the chemical elements that if you chuck it in water it goes and explodes. And he brought a bit of it to Kinloch Hugh, and because it's not Loch, it's Loch Marie, I think is the name of Loch we were camped by the first night. And he got Neil to chuck a chunk of it out into the water, and it had kaboomed. And since Gregor, which is McClellan's brother, he hadn't been there the first night because he'd only just joined us. We got him to chuck a chunk of it into the water, which was like a small fishing harbour, but very low scale. And so it's the closest to being out in a gang of yobs causing mischief that I've been in. And so after we'd blown up the harbour, it wasn't anywhere near as dramatic as that. It just was the equivalent of a small firework in a little sort of jetty. So don't worry, there's no law breaking. I mean, breach of the peace maybe. But yeah, it's a very small place, Flockton. There's 4 or 5 houses. No one seemed to come out to shout at us for being hoodlums, so we went away again. And we had a good sleep. The next day, we all walked to Kyle of Localsh after lots of arguing about how we were going to get there, because Spam wanted to go on the train. And I did not, because I'd already spent all my money. And so eventually we got everyone, because I was like, we do need to actually head off. I've got a bus ticket for this bus. I do want to go on the bus that I'm booked on. And so we eventually managed. Again, it was only like something like 6-7 miles, but it took ages. I thought we'd get there in like an hour. It was more like 2.5 hours. It was ridiculous. But we got there in the end. Everyone mooched around outside the co-op, hiding their beers when the police went past, like the hoodlums that they are. Fortunately, obviously, I don't need to worry about that because I wasn't drinking. I just had a big bottle of lemonade. And yeah, Gregor was going back that day. I was able to get him free on the bus with me, which was a stroke of convenience. And yeah, that was the end of the trip. Was that an interesting story? I don't know. I found it interesting. As a little sort of epilogue. The wedding itself, I wasn't invited to the actual wedding, like the ceremony, or the reception, but I was invited to the party afterwards, and it was a sort of ceilidh. There was lots of dancing and things. And to be honest, I wasn't in a great mindset at all. Like any of last year, my mind was not in a good place. So I didn't really have much fun. It was probably just as well I wasn't at, like any more of the party. I didn't really do any party. I just sort of sat around moping. For the most part, I enjoyed myself a bit, but I felt very bad about it when I left because I'd not really made anything of being at a party, and I kind of felt I was pulling the mood down a bit, which is a shame. Um, but I ate. They had a big giant like pig that they cooked. I ate a lot of pig, so that was nice. That part of it I participated in, and I got a lot of banter. Well, a little bit of banter with various people. I talked to them. I just the problem was there wasn't anyone I knew there. Well, I mean there were people I knew there, but what like I used to do a lot of the dancing at the school, and I used to quite enjoy that for the school dance. That was all fun. There's always people that were willing to dance with me that I knew, but in this case there was not. I mean, it's all very complicated. It's hard to really. But you know, anyway, it's a shame. I kind of feel bad about that. I suspect I probably won't be invited to any more parties like that after my mooching about. But there you go. That's the story of McClellan's wedding and his stag party that for some reason I was invited to. I do kind of wonder whether if because obviously the stag party is arranged by the best man, so it was Gnome that was arranging this hike, and he was very keen for me to come. I do kind of wonder if McClellan was just choosing people to come himself. I do wonder if maybe I would have been really on the shortlist. I'm probably going to sound ungracious and ungrateful for because it's lovely that I was included at all. But I don't know. I do kind of feel, for the most part, a bit of an outsider amongst my friends. It's a shame. I mean, it's lovely to see them, and if there was something of a similar nature again that for some reason I did get invited to, I would still go. But I don't know. I can't help but feel that I don't really fit. I mean, yeah, that's a recurring problem in life for me. But I don't know. It was nice, but I think I was very much a sort of guest character in someone else's show. I wasn't really supposed to be there. But, for what it was, I had a nice time. I enjoyed it enough to, 6 months later, make a video about it. And it is actually, I think it's exactly 6 months, like almost exactly to the day since that. So yeah, that's the story of the McClellan wedding and the hike beforehand. Um, if I'm being realistic, I couldn't really have not gone. Things of that nature, there's only like so many of those that I'm likely to be invited to. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. Am I a stag? No. But, you know, for the purposes of this trip, I suppose that was my function. But it, oh, that sounds like a euphemism. We'll cut that. We won't. I'm not editing this. There's not that many people that know me well enough that I would be invited to any aspect of their wedding, and even fewer of those that I can imagine actually having a wedding. So, like, what I mean, if Gnome somehow finds a Mrs. Gnome, like, I would imagine I'd be invited on that. And Sewage, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I go to Jingle's hen party instead. Who can say? But yeah, it was nice. I'm really sort of spoiling the overall mood of this by over analyzing it. I had a fine time. It's not the sort of thing I would do a lot of. I'm not. I was invited on a similar hike on that started on Boxing Day. I was like, I'm not going to stay outside in the toiletless wild in the middle of winter. That sounds so grim. But I wouldn't be entirely against ever doing a thing like that. Like maybe at some point. Um, we'll see. Anyway, so that's the story. I hope you enjoyed me. Instead of giving it like 5 minutes, giving it. It's been 40 minutes. I might cut it down a little bit and some of the rambling trim it out. But yeah, thank you for listening to me tell you the story about what I did in the summer. It's the only thing I did in the summer apart from crying. It's not. Um, it is. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. This is really rambling. The only person that's going to watch this is Gnome. So I hope you enjoyed me recounting the tales of the wedding from my perspective. Obviously, I can't really say much about the actual wedding because I wasn't there. But yeah, that's it. Hopefully, that's better than the 5 minute version from my New Year's video. I'm going to call this one "The Adventures of these people that I was one of them and we went on a hike." That's the video title.
Traffic on the hour.